and we'll get that cookie. Thank you. Okay, y'all gotta promise me something before I get cranking, all right? If you feel like busting out with an amen or a hallelujah, just let it rip, all right? All right. Because I'm gonna pass the plate before I get out of here. Just so we're clear. Listen, it was an honor to be asked, and I was glad that I could make it happen because what y'all are doing here at this station and in this community is amazing. And what I want to share from the outset is keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate what you're doing for the kids in this community and across this state. I want to share a couple things from the get-go. The first thing is that relationships are what I know to be the foundation of everything that allows a child to find their potential and grow into be who they were meant to be. The final episode of Oprah, she just talked, and she reflected on her years. And what she said really stopped me in my tracks because most of my years I've been working with at-risk youth. And Oprah said, I've interviewed thousands of people in my career. And there was a common theme that ran through every single one of those individuals. And it was their desire for validation. They wanted to know, do you see me? Do you hear me? And does what I say matter to you? And when you're looking at the kids that y'all are working with in this district, there is nothing more true than what they are saying and often cannot find the words to articulate. Do you see me? Do you hear me? And does what I say matter to you? We are hardwired to connect, and I work in schools all over creation, and one thing I want to make clear is we are hardwired to connect. Would you agree that when your life is running the best, you have those relationships in your life? Your public life, your private life, your professional life, your spirituality, it's all connected, is it not? We've got to help our kids feel that connected because we've got a problem with dropping out. We've got a dropout problem that is hitting our nations. And what I want to share with you is that some kids drop out because no one ever noticed that they dropped in. I have a professor friend of mine who was working with some educators, some students who were becoming educators. And before they became interns, they were assigned to their schools. And this professor had them do one more assignment before they started interning, and that was to shadow a student at that school all day long and to write about it. And he said he read those papers, and they got back that evening for that class, and he asked this one particular student of his to share what she'd experienced in the high school when she shadowed this child. And she said, I stayed with this 15-year-old girl from 7:05 in the morning until 2:30. And about that time, she started choking up. And she said, there wasn't a student or an adult in that building that said a word to her all day long. And she said, how is that possible? And what I want to share with you is that we got work to do in our schools. And for those of y'all that are involved in this initiative, for those that y'all are involved in the school systems, we got to make sure that it's not possible that any child in this county, in this state, in this country experience a day at a school building where they are not interacting with caring adults. We got to look at what we know that as far as poverty. And by the age of 3, a little child has heard about 200,000 negative comments. I was at the secondary level, so my whole thought was, how many have they heard by the time they got to me? We got to make sure that we understand how desperately kids need to connect with caring adults. Mother Teresa says there's hunger in the world for love and bread. And I tell you what, there are kids in this state who will give up a meal to have a human connection with a caring adult. So I don't want you to ever think that the time that you spend with a child is a waste of time or isn't having a powerful impact. Our research today says that a strong relationship with a caring adult enables at-risk youth to make life-altering changes in their life. I worked in rural Florida. I grew up in a town very similar to this. I'm talking jacked up pickup trucks. I'm talking guns and knives in their trucks when you still could take guns and knives to school. I'm talking about belt buckles on the redneck boys as big as their heads. I'm talking bumper stickers that said, "Friends don't let friends drive Chevys." It was hardcore redneck rural up in my hometown, and that's what still is close to my heart. But I went to California, and I started working in an at-risk program, a dropout prevention program with very hardcore gang members. And I spent time there, and then I ended up in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was at a high school with about 40 countries represented. And what I realized in all of my journeys is, you know what? Kids are kids. It doesn't matter what region of the country. It doesn't matter their demographic. It doesn't matter their zip code or who their mama is. Kids desperately need to connect with caring adults. And let me tell you what, I was on the YMCA. I was at the YMCA about a year ago. I was on the elliptical. And in my YMCA, there's a bank of windows out there, and every now and again, they change the billboard outside. And I'm on my elliptical, minding my own business, and I looked up, and they had changed the billboard, and I about fell off, because that's what the billboard said. And I don't think the YMCA is going to lie, because they're a church-affiliated organization. We know that kids need our connections, and they're saying in the research that they can have a 65% bump in their confidence with the role models. I know that y'all can bear that out in your work with the group that you're working with, knowing how much confidence they can have just by connecting with a caring adult. The thing with kids in poverty, the kids with under-resourced kids, is we got to find the story behind the story. How many of y'all working with kids have seen a kid act a certain way and you know that's not the real truth? Can I get an amen, a hallelujah, or a? That's right. I had one of my girls call me that I coached back in the 80s. I stay in touch with a lot of my athletes. And Liz called and she said, "Coach, I got a story I want to share with you." I said, "Lay it on me, girl." She said, "I went to New York with a bud of mine, and our friends that we were visiting told us you have to go down to this one bakery because they have big old fat muffins. You got to get your muffin." And she said, "All right, we're going." And they went. And she said, "We got our muffins, and we took it outside because we just wanted to people watch." And she said, "We're eating our muffins, and invariably we're dropping crumbs on the ground." And she said, "We got tickled because these little birds trying to get the nerve to come and grab a crumb and skitter off." And she said, "We were just getting all kind of entertained with these birds." And then all of a sudden, she said, "Coach, all of a sudden, this big old bird comes busting up in there. All the little birds scatter and starts grabbing crumbs. It wasn't even worried about us sitting there." And she said, "I thought, oh, that was rude." And she said, "I said, I'm just going to get those little birds over here." And she said, "I started dropping crumbs." And she said, "I just turned away from that bird, and I started dropping crumbs over here." She said, "But I couldn't figure out what that bird's problem was." She said, "So I turned back around," and she said, "Coach, that bird was about to jump off the curb, and it went under a car," and I'm thinking, what in the world? And she said, "Coach, I leaned down, and that big old bird was feeding crumbs to this other bird underneath the car who had tried to stand up, and it fell back over." And she said, "Coach, I was ashamed of myself because I realized I had made a snap judgment right there. And I had made an assumption of what had happened. And I physically turned myself away from that situation. And it was only when I turned back that I realized how wrong I was and that I needed to find the story behind the story." We got to make sure that we have the patience of Job when we're working with kids, and we allow that compassion and being led by the heart to allow us to do our work and find what's really driving those kids. A great story of finding the story behind the story is The Blind Side. Most of y'all have seen this movie, yes? You had a woman who was, number one, present in the moment, who saw a situation, saw a boy walking out in the frigid cold, and was able to look long enough to know there's got to be a story behind the story. And she told her husband to what? To turn around. And it was in that moment, it was in that decision that she made to turn around that a life was changed forever. And when you think about what she says, because she speaks all over, and people ask her, Leanne, we can't all have kids move into our house. What do you suggest we do? And she says, just turn around. Get out of your comfort zone. Look to your left. Look to your right. Be aware of when you just have time with a child and you instill hope and you show love and you create opportunities for that child. That's going to be enough for that child when you make those connections. And here's the cool thing. It doesn't take a lot to connect with a child. I about cried when I saw that picture. That's not in that man's job description, and to use his little trash picker-upper and play with it, pick up that little girl's lunchbox. But guess what happens because he did? Those two little precious souls feel heard and seen and validated, and they're going to skip back to class feeling a part of the school community, and they're going to be ready to show up and suit up and get down and get after it when it comes to learning. Those connections are powerful. This book right here, Mentors, Masters, and Mrs. McGregor, the author asked people from all over the country to write a story to her about an experience they had with a teacher in their educational journey. And all of these letters came in, and the shortest one in this book was from a person who was a 50-year-old anonymous, didn't even sign their name, but they felt compelled to write. And this is what the letter said. In 3rd grade, my music teacher noticed me. She smiled at me and acknowledged that I was there. This was unlike any other teacher or my parents. That feeling has stayed with me my entire life. Connections are important, and it doesn't take a lot to touch that child. The emotional deposits are what our kids need. And hey, corporations know. How many of y'all have worked in the corporate setting before? I got a few. Corporations know that positive connections are important. They asked Mary Kay, how did you do it? And she said, it's really easy. You got to make your people feel important. That's what our kids need in these communities, to feel that level of importance from us. But here's the deal. When I ask you to think back to your first job to here, would you agree that when you had a community in your corporation, when you had bosses that valued and appreciated and respected and included you in the process, would you agree that all of these things went up? Your engagement, your productivity, would you agree with that? I tell you what, we forget sometimes that kids are just little us's. Kids are just little us's. And so when we're able to help them feel valued and appreciated and part of the process, that's where the magic happens. But here's the cool thing. It's the same for cows. Wait, what'd she say? I zoned out. It's the same for cows. Dairy farmers understand the power of connections. They did a study in England, and they wanted to know, do cows care if we love on them? Do they care if they're part of the process? Check this out. I can't make this stuff up. They divided 2 groups of cows up. In one group, they just hooked up and milked them. And the other group, they named them, they talked to them, they petted them, they thanked them for the milk, they asked them how their little cows were, whatever else you say. I don't know what you say to cows, but they talked to those cows. What you reckon happened to the milk production after that 10 months? It went up, brother. Yes, it did. That right there is a happy cow. That right there is a cow that knows it's been loved on. Do the kids up in this district look that happy? That right there is a cow that felt the value and the love they got. We got to make sure that our kids feel that happy, that they look that happy, that they feel that much of the process. But here's the deal. We've been hearing it from Maslow forever. Have we not? Look at tier 1 and 2. We do great at tier 1 and 2. Physiological needs, safety needs. We do great. We got the SROs in the building. We got the nurses. We've got the evacuation plans. We got all that down. And then I don't know what happens in the educational world. Maybe Kathleen can help us out with this. I don't understand, because our leaders want us to leap over tier 3 and 4 and get up to tier 5. And Maslow's been saying, until we take care until tier 3 and 4. Until they feel seen and heard and validated, we can't get about the learning. How many of y'all have experienced that feeling with that teacher that just made you want to run through walls, that made you feel like you could accomplish anything? That's what Maslow's saying will drive the academic needle in this district and any other. Would you agree with this statement? You can't read a book and run from a lion at the same time. That's not a trick question. Your kids in this district are running from lions. We got to make sure that whatever school you're working in, whatever environment you find yourself with kids, that they know that the safety and the sanctity of being around that environment where they can has got to happen. What are we doing with our kids in our communities to make sure that we help them stop running from lions? You know, I saw this came down from the mountaintop. Rigor, relevance, and relationship. Anybody else heard that a time or 15,000? You know what I thought when I saw that? That's in the wrong order. We got to switch it. We got to make sure that relationships at the front of the line. We got to make sure that every child feels that connection before we get about the content. I tell you what, this reminds me of one of my favorite students, a wise redneck boy I had in Florida in my hometown. He's sitting there working at his desk one day and he's like, you know, Miss B, this ain't rocket surgery. And I said, no, darling, it's not. And I want to go to some of my leaders, and I want to just grab them by the lapel, and I want to shake the snot out of them, and I want to say, hey, this ain't rocket surgery. We got to connect with our kids. We got to make them look as happy as them cows. We got to make sure that they know beyond a doubt that they are loved. And here's the deal. Bonnie Bernard's research is very powerful. She said instead of us fixing the child, which we do great in education, focus on what they need or what's wrong with them, she said, what if we started focusing on the environment that the kids stay in? What would happen? Would there be any impact at all with their resiliency? And she found 3 things that impacted a child's resiliency. 1 is the positive relationships we're talking about. 2 is the high, consistent expectations. We have to make sure our kids understand we are not going to feel sorry for you because of your zip code. We are not going to feel sorry for you because you've got parents that should be in jail but aren't. You've got absentee parents. What we're going to do is we're going to give you the strength, we're going to give you the tools, we're going to give you the love that says you can rise above by having the bar here with the level of expectations that say, I know you can get here. I know you can. I taught American history honors, and a lot of my kids used to cry, oh, Miss B, you're not harder than the AP teacher down the hallway. This is honors, not AP. And it's like, well, you're lucky you got here with me. So sit down, we got some work to do. I ain't got time for no whining. What I got time for is to make sure that you understand you got somebody in your corner that believes in you, whether you do or not. And for some of us, we got to hold the torch of belief. That's right. For the child until you can hand it off to them. And sometimes it's not going to be in the time that you have with them. It's going to need somebody else to come along and hold that torch because that child can't believe that you believe that they could make a difference and they could do what you're saying is up here. I'm not lowering the bar. The other thing Bonnie said is give them opportunities to serve. In this community, with this organization and this synergy that's here in this community, get together and find ways to allow for your kids to serve others. It is powerful when you allow a child to feel. And when you're dealing with kids in poverty, under-resourced kids, how has most of their life been framed? I've got to have somebody give to me. All of a sudden, you turn it around and you allow a child to serve others, miracles happen. I was in 2nd grade, and I got called down to the principal's office. And my principal was my next-door neighbor, lived right up the hill from me. I grew up on 5 acres, orange groves, and woods. That's all I knew. But Mr. Parker, my elementary school principal, used to drive up every single day. And I love me some Mr. Parker. Love me some Mr. Parker. He used to have a ratty old pickup truck, didn't have any air conditioning. It was in Florida. It was hot. So Mr. Parker used to drag his arm out, and he always wear half-sleeve shirts. And so I'd see him in the hallway and make me giggle every time I'd see him, because what happened? His arm was all tan, and then this one wasn't, and nobody knew why. I knew why, because I saw him drive up my hill every day. But when I saw is he would wave at me all the time. I'd be out playing, climbing trees, running in his groves, eating all his oranges. He'd just wave. Well, I got called down to his office one day. I didn't know what I'd done. I would have thought I wasn't in trouble. You know what he told me? I'd been picked to be a hall monitor. I had been picked to be a hall monitor. How many of y'all got to be hall monitors as kids? How many of y'all got to wear sashes? Y'all had a orange sash? Did it have a badge up here? Look, I had a badge up here. It was an orange sash. And wait, there's more. I got to take it home. Every morning, I'd stand in front of my mirror, and it'd be like a ceremony. I'd take that thing, I'd almost have to keep myself from hyperventilating. I'd put that thing over my head, and I'd make sure I adjusted just right so the badge was just where it needed to be. And then it had a metal buckle, and I would do that real slow. And I'd bring it around, and I would be like, click. And I used to love to hear that thing click into place. Oh, I wasn't done yet. I used to make sure, and then I'd do my best Barney Fife. I was ready. You youngs in here have no idea. She's sitting there going, I got nothing. Yeah. Oh, but I rode the bus. So I would get on the bus, and I would sit in the first or second seat right as you got on the bus. Why? Because I could sit right there, and they'd come on, and I would, oh, so subtly lean out like that. Yeah, I'm a hall monitor. Yeah. I'm a hall monitor. And I'd get to school, and I'd go get on my hall, and I know my eyes were this big because I would just look from here to there, and I would think, that's my hall. Bring it. I was ready. And that experience as given that level of responsibility, getting to be put in that position, it changed me because I was shy. I had Elmer Fudd disease until I was in 4th grade. I couldn't say R's. My name is Tara Marisa Brown. Yeah, run that through your head. I can't say R's. I was a hot mess. I was the tallest one until I was 5th grade. I was a hot mess. But when he gave me that moment of responsibility, I got to serve. It made a difference in my life. Find ways to allow them to serve. Search Institute is an organization that has nothing but a focus on what we can do to help allow kids to thrive and grow into healthy adults. Search Institute developed over decades of research a compilation of 40 assets. And what they say is these are relationships, opportunities, personal qualities that all young people need to survive. I want you to grab your sheet on your table. It's right here. It's underneath your table, plate probably. This is an amazing tool, and I wanted to make sure that I got it in your hands regardless of the way that you interact with kids, regardless of your organization, anybody that is dealing with kids. I want to show you a couple things that they say. The first thing is Search Institute says a child needs at least 5 caring adults in order to be able to navigate and get into adulthood and be their healthiest. Well, you know and I know that a lot of these kids don't have 5, and they're lucky to have 1. Poverty research, though, says that they ask people who grew up in poverty and navigated into the middle and upper class, what was it that made a difference for you? 90% of them said, I had at least 1 caring adult. The thing is, you don't know if you're the one that's going to connect with that particular child. Leanne Toohey didn't know that night that she was going to be the one to connect with Michael Orr that night. She just allowed the opportunity to be there. And she took advantage of the opportunity and made the most of it with that one child. I want you to take a look at the assets that you have there. Number 1 through 20 are the external assets. That's where y'all come in. The external assets. What's going on in the community to support that child? What's going on in the home? What's going on with organizations that are interacting? All of those things. The adult role models. The high expectations. The creative activities. A lot of this y'all are doing. But what I want you to do is I want you to look at 21 through 40. I want you to look at 21 through 40. And I want you to ask yourself or those at your table, how many, as a general rule, do we think, as we look at 21 through 40, do most of our kids have? How many of those assets, 21 through 40, those are the internal assets. Those are the ones that drive a lot of their behavior and their decisions. I was doing a training in Florida with about 300 teachers, and they were all Title I schools, very high poverty schools. And I asked them that question, and I had teachers that had problems just looking up after they realized that they had kids they were working with, and they couldn't pick two of those assets that their kids had. Now, although that's sad, here's the beauty and exciting part. When one caring adult is infused into a child's life, the number of assets that can be embedded in that child's life is absolutely unbelievable. And I want to show you what happens when they do. These are risk behaviors: drugs, sex, and violence. Look at what happens when a child just has 0 to 10 assets. And look what happens as you begin to add more and more and more of these assets in a child's life. What happens to their decisions as far as sex and violence and drugs? Assets are powerful, and they're all about connections and relationships. Look at the positive. This is school, health, and diversity. And look at how it grows and how they view school and how they view their health and the healthy choices that they make as you add more assets into their life. It's a miraculous thing when you watch a child be able to have more to pull from with these assets. I want to show you really quickly a very short video clip of a boy named Tristan Love. He was very similar to a lot of the kids that I worked with in Long Beach. Tristan Love was a gang member. And I want to show you this clip. And I want you to look at who it was that connected with him. And as you're watching it, I want you to think about how many of those assets from 21 to 40 were embedded in his life because of his experience with Mama Pat.
By his own account, just 3 years ago, Tristan Love was a teenage gang member on his way to a life of crime on the streets of Houston. Today, this former street kid is a sought-after speak Mama Pat.
This is our newest addition to the Rosenberg family. And this is Mr. Tristan Love. And he is a senior at Booker T. Washington High School.
Tristan lived with his mother as a child. She worked hard at 2 jobs, but the family was sometimes homeless. At 15, he ran away and lived in the streets for a time. He was kicked out of school after a gang fight and watched a close friend die in a shooting.
If you was going to jail, I was going to go to jail with you. Thank God that never happened. And if you was fit to fight, I was going to get in a fight with you. If you was fit to get shot, I was fit to get shot with you because you're my brother. That's the only source of empowerment. That was my only source of family. That was my only source of a person who gave me a positive identity.
Tristan moved to Houston's Acres Home neighborhood to live with his father. He stopped short of dealing drugs, but hustled for money in the streets in other ways. Then, his father's house burned down, and with it, everything Tristan owned was destroyed.
I lost everything I worked so hard to get. I done moved from here, from now to there, and from now to there. I'm here, I'm just tired. I really got to the point where I was ready to commit suicide.
Communities and schools, the nation's largest dropout prevention group, and school officials reached out to Tristan. And at a youth conference, a central idea took hold for him, that relationships with caring adults are key developmental assets that all kids need to thrive.
The relationships I started with different people, that's what changed my life around, the relationship.
Tristan raised his grades at school, formed a peer mentoring group, and began counseling younger kids at the YMCA.
Many people see me and they're like, wow, Tristan, you made a huge transformation. But what can you only imagine if these further development assets was implanted in every student in the school and every student started to make these changes? What kind of society there'll be?
Pat Rosenberg is a board member for Communities in Schools, and she began inviting Tristan to tell his story before audiences.
We all know how, with our own children, we have to find a spark of what they really love and can do. And spark of being able to speak from the heart. And so today, we wanted you to hear from somebody who was kind of not going in the right direction. And so through communities and schools and people at his school and other people nagging him, he's on a much brighter course.
Having people in your life who care about you make all the difference in the world. And he is able as a young person to articulate that. And so it's been quite wonderful for my husband and I to help another kid go to college. And just like I nagged my young people to fill out their college applications, I also nagged Tristan.
This spring, Tristan won a merit scholarship and admission to Morehouse College.
And I ended up meeting Miss Pat. And wait, hold on. And you see, everybody who know Miss Pat started laughing. And I met Miss Pat, and Miss Pat was like, Tristan, I need you to speak here, and Tristan, I need you to speak that. But it was fun because I never just been somewhere and people like, wow, you did good. You know?
For Tristan's father, Billy Love, the volunteers have made all the difference.
They say it takes a village to raise a kid. Yeah, well, that's what my village is.
Somebody tell me what stood out to you in that clip. We're going to open it up. We're all friends here. Shout it out. What stood out? What jumped off that for you? Yes, sir.
Self-esteem went up.
Self-esteem went up exponentially. YMCA says 65% bump in confidence in your academics, and his whole entire life confidence went up. What else stood out for y'all?
3 years. It only took 3 years for somebody to make such a difference in this child's life and turn it around.
Yes. And how many of y'all were surprised at who that was? You got Mama Pat, got the hair, jack it up for Jesus. Espoused the philosophy, higher the hair, closer to God. Making some impact with a gangbanger, minority boy. I point that out because I was doing a training and I had a Hispanic woman raise her hand and she said, I have been putting myself in a box and thinking that I could only mentor Hispanic kids. And she said, I'm so glad that I saw that, because what I realize now is it doesn't matter. And you don't know who you're going to connect with, and you don't know what's going to happen when you reach out. And she said, I'm so glad that I saw that. What did Tristan say was the reason that he kept wanting to go and talk? What did he say? I've never had anybody tell me you're doing good at something. I'm going to ask you that we make sure our pre-K kids hear things about themselves that are good a lot. We can't have our kids get to 15 years old and have that be the first time that an adult says you're good at something. We got to start early. I was doing a training with a room full of SROs, about 300 school resource officers. Let me tell you what, that's a lot of testosterone and a lot of stoic faces up in there. And I thought, I'm just going to ask this question. Probably nobody will say a peep, but I'm going to ask. I said, when's the first time that you had a teacher tell you you were good at something? And this guy in the back of the room raised his hand, and I took the mic back there, and I put the mic down, and I said, tell us when was the first time. And he was looking down, and this is exactly what he said and how he said it. He said, in 10th grade, my English teacher told me I was a good writer. And that's all he said, because guys don't need to talk a lot. They don't need to, they don't need a lot of words. But that was also all he said, and I looked down to make sure, because that grown police officer was tearing up at the thought of what it felt like as a 15-year-old boy to have his English teacher tell him he was good at something. We've got to make sure that we tell our kids a lot. Search Institute also says that we have to help our kids embrace their uniqueness. It is through the voice of caring adults that they can hear and they can actually believe, no, different is good. You can have the ability to help a child pull out of him, what is my spark? What is it that lights me up? And what we know from research is that for under-resourced kids, sometimes when they have a spark identified and they're able to say, yes, I'm good at this, I love this, this makes me get out of the bed in the morning, it often can allow their whole entire attitude to shift when it comes to how they show up at school and how they show up at life. I used to talk to my students all the time and ask them, what is it that you just lose track of time? And was 3 of my boys loved them some video games. And when I talked to them about the different careers you could have in video games, I said, you do know something, if somebody writes those programs, you know somebody gets to sit there and test them, and they're like, yeah, really? And I said, really? How cool would that be to be able to have a career that lights you up and you're blending it with what you love to do? Help your kids find those sparks. Have those conversations with them. Ask them what it is that they can envision seeing themselves doing. I work with gangbangers in California that said, why do I care about school? Because I'm not going to live to be age 21. Part of our work with kids is to help them have a different view of the possibilities that lay for their life. I'm going to ask you to laugh a lot. You want to connect with kids? Laugh a lot. I had the honor of going to Beirut and Dubai and working with teachers and students, and guess what was allowing us to connect? Laughter. Laughter. We laughed a lot with those educators. And I was telling Becky earlier, those educators in Dubai and Beirut, their students bug them too. Their principal gets on their last nerve too. So it doesn't matter what region of the country you are. We got to help our kids understand how powerful the laughter is. How many of y'all love you some Betty White? She's running on full speed because she's never stopped loving to laugh. How many of y'all know some really old young people? We got to make sure we check ourselves and make sure that we're showing up for our kids. Let me tell you something else. You want to connect with kids? Check your level of enthusiasm. And I'm saying this from the depths of my being. Under-resourced kids feed off of enthusiasm. I'm going to ask you from a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being you need CPR. 10, oh, you need a Valium. Where do you fall on a daily basis? And I'm asking you right now, check in with yourself. How do you do on a daily basis showing up with your level of enthusiasm, regardless of what you're doing, regardless of who you work with? How do you show up? What do people feel when they're around you? I knew for me, look, I was teaching a lot of years, 11th graders at 7:05 in the morning. Yes, a.m. you mentioned. 7:05 in the morning, teaching teenagers American history. Can I have a please moment of silence for that? As he so eloquently put it, there's not a teenager on the planet that wants to be awake at 7:05 in the morning. So I'm 1 in a hole right there. History hasn't been historically a really exciting subject for a lot of kids. I'm 2 in the hole right there. I know they're thinking about sex every 4 or 5 seconds. I'm 3 in the hole before the tardy bell rings. So I knew I better bring something else up in there about, oh, I just love history. I just love history. I work with a lot of teachers, that's all they got. I want to say to them, you did know there were kids in this profession, right? Because you're acting like, man, if not for the kids, this would be a really great job. And I'm here to tell you, you want to connect with kids, you got to bring the enthusiasm. How are you doing with that every day? You want to connect with kids, remind them of their strength, catch them being good. Good grief, our educational system does so much with pointing out everything that's wrong with them, their flaws, their weaknesses. We got to catch them being good. You set your intention that says, every child I'm around, I'm going to find something that I can point out their good qualities, something about them I can shine the light on what's good about who they are as a human being in this world. You want to connect with kids? I already talked about keeping the bar of expectation achievement very high. Along with that comes the ability to make sure that you hold them accountable for their decisions, and you help them understand that they have control over their destiny. We've got a lot of kids that feel like, who grow up in poverty, I can't control anything. And the greatest gift that you can give a child is to let them know you are a product of your past. You are not a prisoner of your past. And when I was working with kids in Long Beach, I would not allow them to give me reasons why they could not. I did not allow them to talk to me about their home situation in a way that made it sound like they had no control whatsoever. I constantly turned it around. I constantly challenged them. I constantly built them up with the belief that their life could be better. I understand your father's dead. I understand your mom's in jail. I understand that you had to sleep with 4, 5, 6 guys to get jumped into that gang. I understand nobody in your family's ever gotten a GED. Guess what? You're the CEO of your life. When you say to those kids that you work with, and look, I don't care if they're this big or this big, kids need to hear that they are the CEO of their life. They need to hear and understand that they can make it look different than what they've seen forever. I was telling somebody before we started today, I still go home to my own hometown, and I go to the same bakery that I went to when I was 13, 14 years old, and I invariably run into kids that I went to high school with and grew up with who's never left. And that's fine for some people, and that's okay if that's your vision and that's what you know you're led to do is stay right there in your hometown. But a lot of kids don't dream of anything more because they don't think it's possible. What are we doing to send the message that says it's possible? I coached the boys basketball team at the school, and they were they were the cool kids on campus. Don't let them fool you. They thought they were all that in a bag of chips. What I want to share with you is about half of those boys lived in the housing project behind the school. And it was so dangerous and bullets kept flying out of that housing project that eventually Lindbergh Middle School decided and the city of Long Beach decided we have got to keep a separation between the housing project and the school. And they built a humongous, about 30-foot wall across the whole entire back property. It was called the Great Wall of Lindbergh. Several of my boys lived in that housing project that a lot of them called the Wild Wild West. I was taking my boys home for practice one day, and I got up to the red light to turn left to go into that housing project, and the boys that did not live in that housing project said, "Wait, Coach!" And they leaped over the back of because I had a Bronco too at the time, they leaped over the very back seat, and they laid down flat, and they said, "Okay, you can go now." These are studly 14-year-old boys that were scared to go into that housing project because it was so violent. I share that with you because I made sure that I held them to a standard. I had the bar. I made sure they didn't use their neighborhoods or their life or anything as an excuse. I built a family there. I worked them like dogs. We won the city championship, and they puffed up, and they felt good about the fact that, you know what, hard work feels good. We've got to help our kids understand that. I've kept contact with several of the boys, and this right here is Rick. And that right there is Rick with his son. And I connected with Rick on Facebook, and Rick said to me, "I want to share with you what a lot of the guys are doing," and he started reeling off the jobs that they held, and they were very impressive jobs that a lot of those guys had, and they are so close still that they still hang out. This was one of their birthdays last year. Those are boys from that team. We built a family. We built a connection with them. We had a thing at the end of practice. We could not leave until somebody got in the free throw line and hit a free throw, didn't hit anything but net. Let me tell you what, sometimes practices went long. But that was our agreement. We're not leaving this gym until somebody shoots a free throw, hits nothing but net. One of the kindest, you got that, swish? One of the coolest things I ever heard was when Rick told me, "Coach, we still go play ball, some of us." And he said, "We never leave the gym without somebody shooting a free throw and hitting all nets." I had no idea it was that big of a thing or made that much of a difference to those boys. When I'm telling you they need to have people in their life to let them know you're doing good. Emphasize effort. Let them know how good they're doing, even if it's this small. Where are my teachers? How many of y'all have kids that you think, "Oh, Lord, it's going to be a long year"? We got to make sure with even those children that we highlight and emphasize their effort. Here's what I used to do. I had these postcards when I was at the high school level. I used to sling them all over the district. I just wanted my kids to know, I see you, I hear you, I'm acknowledging your work. I had one boy that failed the first 2 tests. I passed out the 3rd test. I'm sitting at my desk. I'm looking around the room, and I look back, and I'm watching this boy. And the thought pops into my head, would you please just get a higher F so I can send you a postcard? We got to acknowledge little effort. We got to acknowledge little effort. The last thing I'm going to leave with you is that we often have got to reframe. We've got to reframe sometimes our words when it comes to dealing with kids. And we've got to reframe oftentimes how kids are seeing their world. I want to play this very short clip to show you how powerful words can be.
What did you do to my saying?
I wrote the saying, but different words.
Tupac Shakur, in one of the poems that he wrote before he was killed, he said, "You would not ask a rose that grew through the concrete why they had damaged petals. You would relish in its tenacity, and you would love the will to find the sun." I want to tell you right now, in this district, you've got kids who represent roses with damaged petals. Every connection you make with them, you are the water that sustains their drive to keep fighting toward the sun. Thank you for what you do, and I want y'all to know beyond a doubt that every connection, no matter how small, is going to make a difference in the heart of a child. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Is for you. Thank you so much.
Beautiful.
That's fantastic. I got tears in my eyes. You just made me cry, girl.
Thank you.
Lord. Well, was that awesome?